Alright, so this is a really cool statue. This is similar to one that we found the other day in another cemetery on the east side of Ohio. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Least Professional channel on YouTube. How's everybody doing today? So today we're at the Cedar Point Cemetery just outside of Sidney, Ohio in western Ohio. Driving through, stopped to get dinner, and wound up seeing this as we were driving out of town, so I decided to stop, check it out, see if we could find anything cool. First shot that I found right here, this tree off in the background. There's graves underneath it, casting a nice little shadow there, so I want to see if I could get a good shot of it. So I just finished getting a couple of shots of that. We'll see how those turn out. I don't see a whole lot of statues around here right now, but we're walking around taking a look, seeing what we can find. Alright, so we found this the statue over here. So this is the first statue we found in the cemetery. It's a statue of Jesus with holding a little lamb, and he's got some little lambs around his feet. So it's more religious symbology. We're seeing that a very heavy theme around these cemeteries in Sydney. This is the second one that we've seen in Sydney. The first one was on the other side of town, and it only had a couple of statues as well, but it was in-ground headstones, so there wasn't any headstones above ground like there is in this cemetery. I'm trying to see if we can find some other ones. I've got the shot set up over here. I was trying to find the best framing for it. I might have to check out a couple other angles here. I think I found the one that I want. Kind of taking a look at it. I've got some trees in the background. You can probably see. So this is the general angle. So we've got the trees in the background. I'm not sure that I'm 100% happy with that shot, but I looked around a little bit. I'm going to see if maybe I can find something I like a little bit better. Alright, so I tried out this other angle here. Got the shot here, the fern tree right behind. So trying that shot out. Alright, so this is a really cool statue. This is similar to one that we found the other day in another cemetery on the east side of Ohio. Not exactly the same. It's not exactly the same because if you can see here, it's not carved. It doesn't look like it's carved into the stone. This one, she's actually sitting on top of the stone. This is a really cool looking statue. The thing that really strikes me about it is it's framed up with these vines of flowers and these little globes here. I think I found a good angle for it and a good composition. I just took a test shot. I'm going to take a couple more shots here shortly, just to kind of make sure I get just the right one I'm looking for with this, because this is a really, really cool setup, and I really don't want to lose the opportunity to get a great shot with it. So talking a little bit about composition, something I want to show, when you're looking at the shot, there's a headstone right behind this one, right? So you got the headstone right behind this, what you're trying to get. Anytime you're trying to compose a photo in a particular way, looking at what's behind, what's around, there's things off in the background behind this one. There's a road back here, so there's a street sign, some trees, that kind of stuff. But right now I've got my aperture down at 7.1. I might lower it a little bit and just take a couple extra test shots with it. The idea behind that is the lower the aperture, the more blurred the background, which makes this a great opportunity to talk about aperture. So when you're trying to capture a good image, aperture is one way you can let in more light. If you lower down to a lower f-stop, so say f5, f4.1, that kind of thing, the further you lower down that number, the wider open the aperture gets. But the other thing that happens, aside from letting in more light, is that you're actually blurring the background of whatever your subject is. So for instance, with the statue right here, I've got the statue as my subject. That's what I'm focused on with the camera. So essentially what the aperture is going to do is it's going to take the point that you are focused on. So we'll say this statue here, and I could actually probably demonstrate this a little bit easier. So if I'm focused on the statue right here, okay, let's say I'm focused on her nose. Because of how far away I am, what it's going to start doing at a lower aperture number is as we come towards the lens, it's going to start to soften and blur things out. The other part of that is as we go away from the lens behind the statue, it starts to soften and blur things out. And it does this in gradual steps. So something closer to the statue or closer to your focal point is going to be a little bit blurred. The further back you go, you're going to see more and more blur until you get as far away. Infinity is essentially what they call it. You hit infinity where it's almost completely blurred. You really can't make out a whole lot. You can kind of sort of figure it out. If there's trees in the background, you can kind of tell what they are, but you can't really make out the details of the things. So that's a great way to use aperture. A lot of people will use a low aperture number in portrait photography, for instance. So if you're taking a portrait of somebody, you want the background to be blurred behind them. You want the foreground, you want the subject themselves to be in focus. This can kind of bite you a little bit though, because it can get very strong, especially with a real small aperture number. So essentially you could have the nose of the subject that's in focus, and then you can start to see their face kind of soften even. It's not that far back, but it depends on how close you are to the subject, where it starts that blur as it goes back. So for instance, this angel that I'm taking here, because I'm further away from her as I'm taking the shot, what it'll do is if there was something close behind her, it would be a little blurred, but it would still kind of be in focus. Further back an object is, like these trees here, they're not too far away, but they're going to start to really blur. The street sign that's way back there is going to start to really blur. You won't even be able to see it probably without really looking into it. So that's a quick primer on aperture and why it's important to pay attention to what aperture you're using when you're taking an image, because you have to decide, do you want the background of the image to be blurred or in focus? If you want it to be in focus, it might be a good idea to step up to f11, f12, f16, something like that, because then you're starting to get into the realm where it's going to focus everything in the image from front to back. That can be really good for landscape shots, for instance. If you're trying to catch a rock in the foreground with a mountain in the background, and you want everything to be in focus. Now, even at f16, it's not going to be 100% pinpoint sharp on the mountain in the background, but it's going to be a lot sharper than it would be at f8 or f7.1, for instance. The other side of that, though, is if you're using an f16 to try to get everything sharp, you're not letting in as much light because the aperture is closed down a lot. So because of that, you have to do something like lower the shutter speed. You might have to get down closer to a second, or depends on the lighting conditions, but you have to lower the shutter speed down a lot, which could cause, if there's wind blowing leaves or something like that in the trees, you can wind up in a situation where the leaves are blurry or they're not quite as sharp as you want them to be because they were blowing in the wind, because you had to have a higher shutter speed. So keep that in mind when you're adjusting your aperture. Play with your shutter speed a little bit. So you might wind up in a situation where you have to play around with the ISO a little bit and bump that up, depending on the lighting conditions, if you can't lower the shutter speed down. So it's a good idea to keep an eye on that. Play around with all the different settings, and you want to try to get used to the camera itself. Try to get used to taking pictures and trying out different things. Even if it doesn't work, it's better to have 1,000 photos that you've taken testing something out than only have a few. The more photos that you can take, the more practice you can get, and the more you'll have an opportunity to play around with the settings and see what each setting does individually. If you're trying to take a shot, for instance, try to take it in multiple different apertures and see what changing the aperture does. Pay attention to the background, pay attention to the foreground, see, depending on how you frame the shot up, what does the aperture do to the image itself. And if you find that an image is kind of blurry, double check that you're pinpoint focusing on where you want to have the focus of the camera, because that could be a problem too. If you're not focusing in the right spot, say you set the focus, if you've got autofocus on, you set the focus, and then when you go to take the shot, the focus is shifted a little bit, so it focuses on a different point before it takes the shot, and then you wind up with a blurry subject. Keep an eye on aperture is a big culprit, right along there with shutter speed when it comes to blurry photos. If your subject's not in focus, the two biggest culprits are going to be shutter speed. You're not fast enough on the shutter speed, or aperture, you got the aperture down too much. Now, how much blur you have in the background of an image is personal preference. So go down in the comments for me and let me know, do you prefer to see an image with a more blurred out background with the subject sharply in focus? Or do you prefer to see the entire picture as sharp as it can possibly be? A lot of it comes down to really, are you a landscape photographer or a portrait photographer, or in my case, a cemetery photographer, where you're trying to get your subject in focus most of the time and you want the background to be kind of soft. So the cemeteries turned out to be a little bit better than I expected. There's two statues in this one area right here. So we got this one right here back behind me. And right over here we have another one of the angels that we found on the other side of the cemetery. This one's hugging the headstone as opposed to sitting on top of it. So a couple of really great opportunities to get some really cool shots. We've walked around and driven around a little bit looking for more. There's not as many in the cemetery as I'd like because it's a bigger cemetery, but this is a cemetery I'll probably stick a pin in and come back to at some point in the future, because I think there's a lot more to explore than we have time to do today, just because it's starting to get a little bit in the evening and there's still a couple other spots that we want to check out. So I think that's going to do it for this video. I appreciate everybody sticking around, checking it out. Like I said earlier, leave a comment down below. Let me know, do you prefer to see a more blurred background when you're taking a photograph, or do you try to get as sharp an image as possible from front to back? If you like the video, leave a thumbs up. I think it's on this side. I'm getting better. It's taking time. I'm only semi-experienced at this whole YouTube thing. And like I stated at the beginning of every video, I am the least professional channel on YouTube. So take that for what it is. Otherwise, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification next to the subscribe button. I do know that much. If you don't hit the bell notification, YouTube won't let you know when I upload new videos. So make sure to hit that bell notification so that you can be made aware when I do upload new stuff, and you can come and check out some of the crazy and cool adventures that we go on. That being said, thanks for watching. Everybody have a great day.